So here at Girlfriends Without Benefits, we don't believe in re-recording. We believe in putting something out there, and whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it goes live.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one thing we would break our rules for, it's this. So this actually take 2 of the episode that we recorded because we didn't do it justice and we felt limited by time. So without further ado, welcome Mama Ayahuasca to the podcast.
And I think it is important to say who called us out on us not doing it justice.
Oh, Mama Aya.
Correct. We'll get into that a little bit later on how exactly Mama Aya called us out on our shitty first attempt at talking about her. Yeah. But
actually, we could just dive into that right now if you want. That's a good place to start.
That's a great place to start. Let's do it. So yes, give it to us.
Yeah. So Mama Ayahuasca, we're obviously talking about ayahuasca, the plant medicine, is someone who I've connected with and now channel within my work. And she is Mama Bear energy. So she will love you and she will be sweet to you. But if you done fuck up, she gonna call you out.
Mm-hmm.
And the last episode we did, well, it wasn't up to par for her. And she was like, you held back. You guys didn't tell the full story. You guys didn't go down this avenue and you downplayed this and you downplayed this. So I was like, okay, guys, we are breaking all of our cardinal rules and we are going to re-record this episode the right way.
And who cares if it's more than 20 minutes?
Like exactly. Saying fuck time does not matter. We are going to record this the right way.
Mama Aya is not held by time. 4 hours can feel like a lifetime. 4 hours can feel like 10 minutes. She does not even do time.
Exactly.
And I think, to be fair, I've never been called out by Mama Aya. I've studied her. I know about her chemical compounds. I know a lot about her from a clinical standpoint, but I do not have personal experience with her. So I don't have the ability yet. I don't have the ability to channel her. Jade, has she ever come through to you when you've not been under the influence of her?
I mean, I think we'll get into that as we go. It's not the same as it is for Cass. And I think that's the whole point that we were saying. We've really got to share with people who are listening the different lenses, viewpoints, and perceptions.
Yeah. So when Cass says that Mama Aya called her out and what exactly she said to her, that's not necessarily everyone's experience who knows her or who uses her. That is something that is special to Cass.
Mm-hmm.
She has a very special relationship with Mama Aya that I know people that have used her, and that I don't know anyone that has the connection that she has with her. So
I like to say she's my best friend. Let's just be honest.
And she's a real bad bitch.
Exactly. Little musical interlude.
I think that it's also good to say, though, that once you have sat with Mama Aya, she is part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And the shaman who was leading my experience was so eloquent in describing that. And I think that it's important that, like, once you have sat with her, she's in there. So
yeah, I feel like she, and Jade can probably speak to this as well, she fine-tunes your intuition. Like the things that you kind of used to doubt from an intuition perspective, she goes in there and really sharpens your skills. So like if you were, practice makes perfect, learning a new language, she goes in there and expedites that process for everyone. At least from what I've seen working with, several people.
Yeah.
So Cass, could you give us a little bit of your history with her and your kind of understanding and experiences with her and how you've formed the relationship that you have with her?
Yeah. So my path, I guess, to ayahuasca was a little bit of a winding road. And I have a relationship with any sort of substances that is like the child of an addict. Like I will stay so far away from it because I don't want to go down that path, because I watched and witnessed people going down that path. So for me, I had a deep respect for Kambo, which was like kind of my first plant/animal medicine that I did when I was 20 years old. because it helped me get over PTSD. And I probably from that point on felt called to Aya, and we'll probably get into it more with Jade, but like it is a calling. She starts showing up everywhere. You start hearing about her, you start hearing podcasts about her. Like she just makes her presence known, and kind of really takes center stage, if you will. So I had a about 10-year relationship with that, of her like making her presence known, and like me putting it in the kind of in the back of my head of like, okay, eventually this will happen. And it did, and it hasn't been quite the same since. I sat initially for 4 intense ceremonies, and then I was trying to figure out how many times I've sat / used / worked with her since then. And the closest I can think of is probably up over 70 to 90 sessions. So pretty in detailed in-depth relationship. Some are guided with shamans, some are self-guided and working with her alone. But is now become essentially a part of me, as Jade mentioned, and a part of the work that I do, and a part of kind of who I channel and who I carry forth on spiritual team. So I see no difference. God, the universe, Buddha, Allah, they all sit up there right next to Mama Aya and Pachamama.
And if Cass and I were to have a conversation and I was like, Cass, I want to experience ayahuasca, I'm feeling called to her, Aya would literally talk to Cass. Like, correct. What does she say when I say that I'm interested,
well,
or
even
that I feel called to it?
What's so funny is even when we just started the podcast and you're like, I haven't sat with her, I get yet. Like I get very like distinct characteristics of her speaking. So for you, there's obviously things you have to go through. I see that she's part of your healing from a diabetic standpoint. I see kind of the blueprint of that. I'm able to tap into people's highest potential timeline, which we should eventually fucking do an episode on. Like, sure. I don't know why we haven't. But for you, I see it's part of your journey. You're just not there yet. So, and that's for a lot of people too, though, honestly. There's people who try to force it. And I truly feel like those are the people who have a harder time experiencing it, because, or they're doing it for the wrong reasons, or they're doing it for kind of what I call righteous partying. They're like, I'm going to go get high with integrity. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, she is going to give it to you if you're going to go, quote, get high with integrity.
Yeah. I think anytime
you over and put it in where the sun don't shine. So
yeah, I think anytime you sit with plant medicine, or I think it could even be argued, use like what one would call recreational drugs, even though it's been argued MDMA is medicine, it can be used as medicine as well. When you do it with intention, it makes all of the difference. So when you start to feel called or interested in Aya, then you need to be asking the question, why, and what am I trying to accomplish when I sit in this ceremony? What work am I trying to get done, from a mental, emotional, physical standpoint?
So I feel like that's a really question, Jade? I was going to say, I feel like that's a really good segue, Jade.
To what? Answering that question? Yeah. My whole drug journey, drug / plant medicine journey, I, listen to previous podcasts, my background in the cult, the good old cult. I had not smoked a cigarette, I had done a little bit of drinking that was not against the Bible according to my cult. So I had some wine.
Sacrament.
Is not right. And no, you could do it for fun.
Blood of Christ.
Yeah. No, you could do it for fun too. You just couldn't get drunk. But anyway, so I had done nothing, and no pot, no. And when I left the cult, I set out very purposefully to try all of the drugs that I wanted to, without feeling, dangerous. And I hesitate to say, it's hard for me to talk about this because I don't want to give this impression that, I treated this very serious thing cavalierly, or that everyone should do that or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like,
is it safe to say though, you like it wasn't just drugs for you, it was everything that life had to offer that you were limited on. Is that safe to say?
Oh, Cass, thank you.
She's coming through. I mean, I'm just
exactly.
like, hold on, clarification.
Yes.
Be fair to yourself. Yes.
Exactly. Like sexual experiences and all of these experiences that I had held myself back from naturally wanting to experience because it was bad or wrong. And I was like throwing away that narrative and recreating. And so
even down to the clothes you wear, the jewelry you allowed to wear, the way you wear your hair,
exactly.
like
Everything, makeup, clothes, everything, everything. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So that was a very important part of my healing journey. And because I did it in that way, I've had really amazing experiences with pretty much all of them. I mean, yeah, I can get specific if you think it's a good idea, but yeah.
Well, what was the first thing you tried? How old were you when you first?
40.
And what was your first experience with any sort of medicine, plant medicine?
So I was in Oregon. And
of course you were.
Hey, of course you were. Me
right,
too.
when everything was legalized, and we went to this little fishing village, and we met this.
What was the name of it? Can I ask?
Oh God, I can't remember the name of it. Tiny little fishing village, and we made friends with these fishermen. They were a rough crew, and he threw this huge bud of very pungent, pot at us, and he's like, "This is good stuff," and it was good stuff. But interestingly, I don't like pot at all. I've tried it several times, and I really don't like it. The next one I tried was acid. And that was
Jesus, Jade, you went from marijuana to acid?
Yes.
I just love Kaylin's face. If you guys aren't watching the YouTube video, it's worth it just for that face alone. Just a little plug to our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was
like, what a gateway. When Jade tries something for the first time, she goes all in.
That's for everything. So, like sexual, like all of the things. Yes, all in. I was all in.
The reason my face is because I, again, have a clinical understanding of psychoactive drugs.
Yeah.
Like, I understand their chemical makeup. I understand what parts of the brain they act on.
Yeah.
I understand the potential experiences that you can have on them.
Right.
And so when someone says marijuana, I go, my brain to that section of the Rolodex, and I see, there's no lethal dosage, like all of that information.
I just see Kaylin like being like carbon, 3 molecules, hydrogen, 4 molecules.
Honestly, I probably have the flashcards with all of that information on it somewhere.
Yeah, well, I highly
acid though.
Yeah.
Marijuana.
Yeah, no, that was my next one, and that was one of the most powerful and life-changing experiences I've ever had.
I'm sure.
Second only probably to Aya, in that I've done it several times, and it's interesting. Like I feel like every drug or every medicine that I've used, it has a very specific lesson to teach me. And once it's over, I don't need it anymore. Like I have very little desire to ever use acid again. Because
what were the circumstances around it?
Yeah.
And what were the intentions?
So the intention was, as Cass kind of phrased it, like wide open to just, I need to know myself better. I need to know what I want. And I want to do this. And I'm in a safe place. I was with several friends and we were camping. So that was the environment.
And just a little caveat too, from a lot of the clients that I've worked with that have come out of like a religious trauma, like super closed off background. Like I work with a decent number of people who have come from cults or from like specific religions, Mormonism.
Same with my clients.
Literally, that is their intention for starting to like look at plant medicine and starting to work with a shaman is they're taught to seek, and they're like, okay, cool. What other books are out there versus the books that I am handed?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the lesson that acid has had for me all along is I would start to feel really happy and laugh. And then I would get this overwhelming feeling. I'm going to start crying, that I was doing it wrong, that I was missing something, that there was more to it, that I'm supposed to do something. And I would say, my partner's always been with me when I've ever done these things, because he's my safe person and he kind of is like my guide kind of is. And I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing something wrong. And he would always look at me and say, there is no wrong. There's no wrong way. You can't do it wrong. And then I would say to my friend, like Heather, she was another one that I felt really safe with. Heather, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I'm so happy. And I think that's wrong. And she's like, there's no wrong. Just be. She just kept saying, just be. And that was the lesson for it. Like you can't teach someone that. You could do 10 years of therapy to teach someone how to just be. And you sit with this medicine for 6 hours and laugh your ass off and look around at how amazing and beautiful everything is. And your perception's changed. And it's like, okay, I got that lesson. So yeah, if that's not a plug for acid, I don't know what is.
Sorry. I still have zero desire to do acid.
I have zero desire. I'm sorry, Jade. I'm so happy that you found what happiness was, but there's not a single molecule inside my body that yearns to do acid.
Yeah, mushrooms and MDMA, and there's been a few others too. I've never tried crack or heroin, so that's good. No, never will.
I love you. Wow, Jade, that was,
I know, TMI.
a lot.
TMI.
No.
There's no such thing as TMI on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely not. No, I appreciate your candidness talking about it. I will say, appreciate that you have no desire to do crack or heroin. Those things really aren't good for your health.
No,
so I'm glad that I
great.
don't have to go into why you shouldn't try those ones.
I'm just thinking of your mental Rolodex of like now crack and heroin going.
I'm like, oh God, we're really getting close to the edge of not so good stuff here.
You're like, okay, lethal
please
dose
don't
very
go into
low.
fentanyl. Please don't go into fentanyl, please.
No.
Oh, okay. But I do want to know, Jade, so at what point did Aya start talking to you and inviting you and making you curious about her?
Yeah, so I moved from that kind of like wanting to experience everything full on life to recognizing it was time to heal. And so that, although experiencing was part of my healing, I had to get more serious, right? So that's when astrology came into play. And as I went through that, I started to, as Cass alluded to, feel called to ayahuasca, because everyone, everywhere I was going was talking about it. And I'd open, an article and it would be talking about it. And I'd hear someone, they'd be talking about it. And I just, started doing my research, and then just felt like it's overwhelming sense that I was supposed to. And that's how I was called to it.
Now, do you believe I believe she paves ways for people. So she puts the people in the right path. She I truly believe will discount your flight so it's palatable for you. Like she will make sure you get there and into the spot that you need to. Was that true for you as well?
All of those things, Cass, all of them, like to the, the little questionnaire I filled out, and I almost didn't answer the phone, and it was a person interviewing me. And then I almost couldn't go, but the dates got changed for another thing I had to do. Yeah, no, it was so clear that I was supposed to go.
Yeah.
And I had like 4 months to prepare, and I did that more mentally and spiritually than physically. I didn't take it. Some people like months, they stop eating certain foods, and I didn't do that as much, but mentally and spiritually, lots of journaling, lots of pulling cards and questioning what it was, what my intention needed to be. And it kind of came down to generational chains that I was carrying, and I did not want my daughters to pick them up. And I was starting to see areas they had, and I was given the word that I could help them drop those chains and I could stop it. And
So just a little shaman side note, we'll call it. When you do this work, it's 7 generations forward and 7 generations back of generational trauma or ancestral trauma or past life pieces that come into play, that you're starting to rewrite the history, if you will, of people's belief systems, of your family's belief systems. It goes super, super deep, very potent.
I didn't know that.
So interesting to me, because when I was learning about it, of course, you know, I did have, mind you, I went to the University of Oregon, Oregon, took a psychoactive drugs course.
Probably spent time at that little fish market in the town that then just started with the letter N.
I will not tell you all of the people that supplied marijuana to me, but they all came from the town of Eugene, Oregon. So
right.
All that to say, you know, we're talking about like more of a liberal university, right? A liberal view on drugs. And even the professor that taught still teaches courses around it to this day and has, you know, studies about psychedelic drugs and such. And I would say has a pretty strong belief that a lot of those psychedelic drugs shouldn't be a Schedule I drug. But the one thing that we really didn't talk about when it came to ayahuasca was the shaman aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I knew a lot about it from the PTSD perspective, and from that clinical psychology view, and like how that realm is just so divided on the subject of, is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Is it, you know, is it a good thing? Is it not a good thing? And that goes for more than that goes for MDMA, that goes for ketamine, like
ecstasy,
so Cambo, like there are so many studies out there, and there's a lot of research I think still to be done about the benefits of using in a controlled environment for help with mental health problems. But all that to say, I understand ayahuasca in that way, and never was really interested in it. And what's funny is I wouldn't even consider that I had trauma when I was learning about it either. Like I wouldn't say that I was called to it. I actually wasn't called to do any of the drugs. The only drug that I've done was because of the situations I was in, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Why not? But like never have I like said that I felt called to anything. Now, since then, obviously, I've been through some stuff and seen some stuff and spent a few years with a therapist, right? And worked through, and have only since now learned this whole other side of it, which is, I feel like a disservice to me as a, 400 level college student, not teaching them that information, because there is this whole cultural side to it. And we're talking thousands of years, this medicine being passed down and what it does. And it's well known of what it does. So Cass, can you chat a little about that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I'm like, where to start? So for me, I think for those of you guys who don't know my background, I am cross-culturally trained, which means I started with a Mexican shaman and then moved to a Peruvian shaman and then moved to a Colombian shaman and then moved to a Hawaiian shaman. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is most people I've met who have this path and have been put on this path have only been with one culture. So they know what's going on in that one culture. They know the plants, they know the energetics, they know the prayers from that one particular culture. But sitting where I sit, I have gotten to absorb a lot of, nuances from each particular kind of tribe and culture. And for me, what I've noticed is that they're all the same. Like, literally, they're like Ave is Hawaiian. It's their ayahuasca. It is a different plant, but the same energetics, the same ceremony, similar prayers, similar ways of opening the luminescent body, like similar connection as, Yahe, which is, Colombian, for ayahuasca. Like it's very similar. So for me, as I was sitting there and kind of, as I've dissected this and as I've kind of worked with all of these, I'm like, there's just so many, like, there's like the meta to the meta to the meta. Like, it's just so interconnected. And like, also like, it still blows my mind to this day, like thinking about kind of the shaman from whatever, 2000, 3000, 4000 years ago, who were all doing the same things across the globe without actually having communication back and forth to one another. So like, still like, I can't conceptualize, and I'm probably not supposed to, nor wrap my brain around the fact that like, it is so much larger than like just sitting in ceremony. You're going through like just insane levels of energy, insane levels of community, insane levels of, indigenous tribe and indigenous cultures passing down lessons from one to another, that it just, like, thinking about that, like, literally, I mean, you guys probably agree, hurts your brain.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's probably best to not open up that box.
Correct. So what's interesting for me is the shamanism actually started originally in Siberia. And I didn't track it back until after I had started mentoring with some of my first mentors, that my grandfather was an herbalist and made his own tinctures and things in a concentration camp. And I was sitting there one day with one of the mentors that I work with, and he's like, "You don't think he was a shaman? You don't think had World War II not happened, he would have had any healing calling?" And I was like, "No." Oh, I'm like, "Duh, of course." So I have that lineage too, that, is kind of paternal lineage, father's side lineage as well, which is kind of cool.
And so this is my naive side, but could you explain what the intention is that is the same amongst all of the cultures that you have been trained in?
Correct. Yes, 100%. So this kind of goes back to soul and kind of soul separation. So everyone, and I'm not going to even use the term everyone, most people are born with their soul actually inhabiting their body, and they are born what's considered merged. And this is where you, like, if you ever held a baby and the baby, has that intuition of they like people. Some people, they don't like other people, much like a dog, or they like will kind of like turn around and like look up to the sky or like see something, and like you think that they're looking at something that's not really there. They have kind of all of these intuitive pieces connected at a young age. There's some caveats to that. If you've had mama drama, which is what I call it, and your mom was going through some stuff when she was pregnant with you, you can actually be, your soul can be separated in utero. And that's where you start getting like ancestral and generational trauma. So a good example is my firstborn was like that. She came out nonverbal and was testing kind of on the autism scale. My second one said hi at 4 weeks old. Like, I couldn't have a clearer.
I literally heard her say hi. She said hi to me.
We were there.
We were there.
She did. She said hi to both of you guys.
Yes.
So like
repeatedly.
Like you can't have more polarity than that. And that's just a really, like, thank you, children, solid example of like someone, or, a child whose soul is in the body versus a soul who's actually been already separated. Everyone separates, from what I've understood up until this point. Every person has separated. You could probably get into like the religious side of it and be like, was Jesus separated? That's a whole podcast for a different story. I've had those things drop in my head, so I figured I'd, throw them in here too, to really confuse the listeners.
Mama Aya hasn't given you that answer yet. She won't tell you.
I've not gotten that answer quite yet.
Dang it.
So probably underneath the category of things Cass doesn't need to know.
We'll file that one away.
Correct. So with that being said, like, every soul will separate from the body generally between the ages of 5 to 8. And it's because they realized like the world isn't safe. And it doesn't have to be like a physical, mental, like sexually abuse, like big trifecta thing. It can literally be like, oh, someone doesn't like me, or someone made fun of me, or someone like called me a name, or something. Like, there's something that throws off their energy as to where they are, that they actually their soul will separate. And then they start seeing kind of the world in a different perspective. So the whole journey of plant medicine is to get the soul back to reincarnate in the body. That is the big, like, at the meta of the meta of the meta, that is the biggest intention, is to get the soul to merge back in the body. Because when the soul is in the body, you actually trust your intuition. You can live a more whole, healed, fulfilled life. You can have conversations like Jada being like, hey, like I tried these things and I don't feel called to them anymore, because she's like now back in her body. Welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's just a different conversation. Like you recognize certain things like anxiety. Like anxiety comes and goes, but it's not your identity anymore. So you're like you're no longer like kind of absorbing all of these pieces and all of these things. You know that you're sovereign, you know that you're whole, you know that you're healed, you know that you're divine. And then like it changes every perspective you've ever had.
So I understand the clinical side of how ayahuasca can treat PTSD, complex or PTS, or complex PTSD. What do you know it as though?
Oh goodness. So for me, and I believe that like, so let me like do a little caveat here. I don't believe everyone is called to work with plant medicine. Just a total little side note. I believe that there are some people who are called to get their healing from other ways and beings and paths. I don't believe everyone is like, if you're hearing this and you're like, I want to be whole, like, let me go do ayahuasca. Like, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I just want to like caveat
keep
that.
listening. If you're feeling that way, keep listening.
Yeah.
You're not at the end yet.
That's a really important caveat. Yeah.
It is. And I feel like there are people who are maybe practicing shamanism, but weren't necessarily called to it. That'll be like plant medicine for all. We actually had a client that had that experience. She went and did plant medicine and then was like, it's the end all be all. It's the only answer to healing. And I'm like, actually, it's not. So what was the question?
So I understand the clinical side as to how ayahuasca affects the brain and how it can be used to remove the effects of PTSD and complex PTSD and trauma. So how is it seen from a shaman's perspective of how it fixes that?
So kind of along that line of conversation when it comes to like the soul, during these things that cause like complex PTSD or whatever the case may be, there's fragments of the soul that will fracture off, and the fragments of the soul also ties into core identity. So with that being said, like after and it's not just, so it can be so many, but there were so many fractures and it was over time, or it could be such a large fracture that both can trigger actually PTSD symptoms. It's either frequency or intensity is kind of the two pieces that they look at. And then with that piece being missing, that's part of your core identity that is missing. So without that, you're kind of like wondering like, where the hell am I? What is going on? Like there's some incongruence in the body versus like within the physical space. So like basically the body and the brain almost can't catch up to one another. It's kind of the shamanic perspective, if you will. So when you're doing a merger, not only are you calling back all of those pieces, which you can do that without using any sort of plant medicine, you're calling back the whole soul into the body. She will not serve you what you do not need. So if you are not ready for a full merger, she may call back 10 of those pieces that you have lost, and you may feel like a new person, but your soul may still not be inhabited in your body. So there's like a process, because if you were to also, I've seen it happen this way too, where people are like, well, I just want to merge. I just want to merge. And then like them merge and then be like, I don't know why the fuck I'm here. I have one client that I'm working with right now who is complex PTSD, who had a near-death experience that merged him, but he still has PTSD because he never did the other soul work. So we're basically going back and doing the soul work to get him to feel what he actually is whole. So you have someone with complex PTSD who's like, I'm not suicidal, but I don't belong here. And I'm like, yes, because there's this gap. Like we need to work in the gap area.
Interesting.
I love when you have your shaman hat on, Cass.
Thank you. It doesn't often come off.
Preach.
No, I think that's interesting. And I'd love to go back to that point that you said that not everyone is meant to work with her, and that you can find that healing in other ways. Obviously working with a shaman, you have the ability to work with people and help them get there without even taking Aya. Is there any other like plant medicine that you use or that you would suggest that you have seen have similar
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I feel like it's time to switch gears and chat about psilocybin.
Psilocybin. Yes.
Which is, I don't even know if I would, there's some similarities, but there's also some drastic differences. From what I've seen and what I've worked with, don't believe you can do a soul merger from psilocybin. I mean, maybe with some like gallon-sized bags of mushrooms, maybe. I don't know. I've not gone to.
Yeah, you've never done a God dose, a hero dose. You haven't, Cass.
Let me get clinical real quick.
Yeah.
Yes, because I have to add my clinical. So the molecule drug, if you will, that makes ayahuasca have its effects that it has is DMT. Now, what it also has is a MAO inhibitor, and so which makes the effects of ayahuasca last longer. Psilocybin also has one of its compounds, drugs, DMT, but does not have the added MAO inhibitor, MAO inhibitor. So it will not last as long. Now you could combine it with one if you wanted to and attempt to make it last. But the two drugs in and of themselves, even though technically they have the same molecule chemical that is working to give you that experience in your brain and your body, are different.
So I just want to respond back to Jade. No, I have never done a God/hero dose, because if I was and I was not called to it, I would be fucked over.
Yeah, this is a really good time to talk about the beautiful way that you ask permission from your plant medicines. You know when you're supposed to and how much.
Yes. And I think you do as well now. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
There's a respect for it.
I think that is the key, isn't it?
Yes.
It's respect for it. It's a reverence for it, and not cavalier or, oh, this will be fun. Because once you've journeyed with plant medicine, it's not fun is not the word. It's not fun. It's
enlightening.
Work.
It's experience.
Yeah, but it's work.
Yeah,
it's a journey. That's why they call it tripping. I mean, it is a trip you have to go on, and it's not something you just do like, whatever.
No, but even with like using mushrooms, like when I was kind of one of the first times that I worked with them, I literally she had them all in Ziploc bags, and they were all different size bags, and I literally was picking them up and I was like, nope. No, like, and it was, there was, 5 in one bag, 7 in another bag, 9 in one bag, 3 in, and I just went through until I got the yes answer that like, I knew I was in the right space. I knew what I was supposed to do, but like from a dosage perspective, and same with ayahuasca, like there is kind of this, a little bit egoic thing where like people who are serving will be like, if you can hear me, like say, like, time for another cup, do it. And I'm like, that's not necessarily like what I believe.
No.
Like, if you can walk doesn't mean necessarily like you should drink more. You should listen to her. And if she says, go up and get more, you go up and get more. Otherwise she's going to reactivate without you getting more. And you're going to go down a different path than what you thought you were going to.
Yeah.
But there's like even for me, like using an ayahuasca tincture or like using even my regular standard, like herbal tinctures. How many do I need? Do I need 12 sprays? Do I need 10? Do I need whatever, like what's the number for me? And I'll kind of muscle test and go through that
but not everyone has the ability to do that or has done the work, the preparation.
Yes.
That's to listen, right?
Everyone has the ability to do that.
Everyone has the ability to do it. Yeah.
But getting there is
whether they've tapped into it or not.
Right.
Correct. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said they don't have the ability. They haven't done the work to know that they have the ability.
And then trust too comes into play here too, because like, okay, if I were to sit here and I were to like say, again, plug to YouTube channel, hold my tincture bottle and say, okay, cool. Am I supposed to do this today? I get a yes. Am I supposed to do 5 drops? I get a no. Am I supposed to do 10? Like I'm actually going through a conversation with whatever substance in whatever fucking amber bottle I am using. And I am like actually asking and working with them to say like, is this right for me today? And sometimes it's a flat out no. Like it's a very clear no. And I have to honor that and trust that that's the right way to go. Versus being like, well, I was told to take it every day, so I must take it every day. Like, no.
I feel like you need to tell the story of your microdosing with psilocybin and how you literally, it came back.
Oh my gosh. So after working with psilocybin, I started microdosing, and I was like 1 day on, 2 days off, I think was the cadence. And sometimes I am forgetful, and I just like went to go. I was taking niacin, B6, and then the psilocybin kind of microdose combo. And they were 2 separate pills, the niacin and B6, and then the psilocybin separately. And I thought it was the right day. I thought it was 2 days off and then on. So I took the B6, and I was like, I can only swallow 1 pill at a time. We'll probably talk about choking trauma one day on the podcast. You'll know what that's about then. But I can only take 1 pill at a time. So I took the B6, was totally fine. And then I went to take the psilocybin, and I had a full gag reflex where it like projectilely vomited came out of my mouth. Just that pill, not the B6 I just took. That was totally fine. But it was because like when I looked at the calendar, I was like, oh shit, it was the wrong day. Like it was, yeah, I skipped 1 day versus 2 days. So I was trying to take too much too soon. So like, that's the level of respect that I have with noun plants, where like, also it's like a full body, like it's a full body no if it's a no.
And your body will tell you as long as you're tapped in.
So going back to Jade's thing, I don't think I could ever unconsciously do crack or heroin or anything like that. I think I would die. Like there's no gray area there. So.
Yeah.
So tell me more about psilocybin and its use in and working with it as plant medicine and setting intentions and such, and how it's the same or different from Aya for you and for you, Jade.
Jade, I'll have you actually start on this one if you don't mind.
Yeah. I've used mushrooms at first for more recreationally, but quickly realized that it wasn't fun. It was, because the information and the downloads I was getting and the physical reaction I would have to it is very similar to ayahuasca. Like your body is like, you purge sometimes, your stomach feels off, you have to go in and you have to meet yourself and it can be kind of scary sometimes. But again, like the intention, I started making the intention to, what do I need to learn from this? And it was really hand in hand with the acid, which was like just being okay with who I was and where I was, and recognizing that there wasn't good, bad, black, white, and these compartments that I had spent 40 years building were coming down. And psilocybin was definitely key to that. And the other thing that psilocybin did for me is helped me meet nature in a way that I never had before. So highly recommend outdoor experiences with her, because it is, the nature will just be opened up to you. I spent like 2 hours looking at a spider.
That's the like first time. Day.
I know. That's true, Cass.
You know what shit? Okay. Sorry.
Like I wanted to, again, I was with Eric and this car was driving by and I wanted to go tell the people in the car to come and see the spider because it was so beautiful. I was like, we have to go tell them about this spider. And
he was probably like, no, we don't.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is you did psilocybin before you did ayahuasca, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you done it since post ayahuasca?
Yes.
Was that experience different for you?
I think it's, again, like I start to take it and then my body's just like, no, there isn't anything here for you. Like you're still digesting Aya and there's nothing here for you. So you don't really need it. And so I just don't, if I start to do it, I don't do very much. And then I'm like, no. So I haven't really done a lot. It's been 1.5 years since ayahuasca. So haven't done much.
That's interesting to me. So I ayahuasca before I did psilocybin. And I actually was talking to Jade when I was being called by psilocybin, because I get called generally by bugs. This time it was cockroaches. And I was like, Jade, like, give me the best practices on psilocybin. That was literally my conversation to her. And what's interesting to me is this is just so typical of plant medicine. Everything that I was told that would happen didn't happen. So like for me, Jade's like, go outside in nature. I was like, yeah, like this is going to be wonderful. And I sat outside for, I don't even know, like 4+ hours, like waiting for something to open. But as you were just talking about the spider, I was like, oh shit, like I do that without plants.
Yeah.
Like I don't need a plant substance. Like I sent them pictures of spiders this morning. I was like, look at how beautiful she is.
Mm-hmm.
She was pretty beautiful. But what's interesting to me is like, I had a very ayahuasca, very plant medicine, very consultative, communication back and forth with the plant experience. And I was like, there's a little teeny piece of me that was like, I just wanted to see like the pretty colors. And like, you're like, Jade's like, nature breathes and you like can see all of its like beauty. And I was like, I'm getting nothing. Like I am hanging out with the spider, like typical, and a bunch of cockroaches around my bed. Like in like the most that's a whole story probably for a different day, but 5-star resort, never seen a cockroach there. And I had like 30 in my room. So, and then worked with psilocybin, never saw another cockroach. Like that is my experience with all sorts of plants. So I just think it's very interesting that like, again, you, even in listening to this podcast, you might be like, oh, it'd be cool to have that experience, or, oh, I would love to have that, or I would love to have that level of consciousness or awareness or healing or whatever the case may be. And you're going to get what you need. You're not going to get what it is you might want or think you might want.
And I think too, being prepared, like one of the things that it has been described to me, and like a lot of what I've learned, is that it basically takes any kind of trigger you might have and completely erases it. But you have to face it and you have to accept it during your ceremony or ceremonies before it takes it away. And like being ready for that, right? Being prepared, knowing that you're going to go into that, or you have the potential to go into that, can be really scary.
So getting kind of super raw and real, and I think this will make sense to the listeners. Going into an Aya ceremony for me, I was like, I want to figure out like my trauma. I want to figure out where I'm triggered. Like, please help me heal that. And going into it, like Kaylin can attest to this. She knew Diana very well at that point. I had a child who was completely nonverbal. Like she kind of mumbled and had her own language, but like did not speak. And she was 3.5. So like I was going in there with the intention, or so I thought, to work through my body stuff. And after kind of my ceremony that very same night, she started speaking in full sentences and paragraphs. So like would have been completely out of my consciousness or awareness that I could have even remotely asked for that. But like, honestly, would 100% do it. Like those who are listening who have children, you're like, you do whatever the fucking takes for your child, like
Correct.
Plain and simple. So like, again, out of consciousness, out of awareness, would have never thought to ask, but could have been the biggest gift that I could have ever received from her. So like, that's the level we're talking.
Jade, what was that experience for you then? Because you said you went in, right, wanting to break those generational chains. What was it like during the ceremony going through that? And or what did you have to go through in order to do the work?
Yeah, the first night she spent most of the time with me being my mother. And she cradled me and like held me, and it was like, it was like what you're taught that God is supposed to be for you, but there was a human component to it. Like it's really hard to explain. And then she kind of woke me up like I was literally like a baby, and she like woke me up and she's like, are you ready to see how connected you are? And she asked if she could go through my ear, and then she like sent this like tendril through my ear, and I could feel like my whole body like getting connected to the ground. And then she like pulled me up into the sky kind of, and I'm saying this in words, but it wasn't, like that exactly. Yeah. It was colors, and but that was the lesson afterwards. That was the first night. The second night, she got a lot more raw and real. And she showed me, when my sexual, abuse had taken place. I had really blocked it out, and I knew that I needed to kind of face it and meet it. And so she showed me that, and showed me some of the trauma in my family. And then it's hard to put into words, but showed me how I could break the chains. So
did you see any sort of immediate change like Cass did with her daughter, or has it been gradual?
Gradual.
Yeah. It's a little bit harder too, just because so mine is young and her daughters are older. So like I don't want to say like they're more baked than my child was. My child was still very raw from a like moldable perspective. So yeah, hers is definitely going to be, I would have been very surprised had you said yes. They woke up, I don't know, ice skating or some shit like that. Like, I don't know, where do you go from like being like, because your identity is formed, your ego is already formed, like everything at those ages is kind of already come together, versus 3, like you're still like a ball of mush.
Yeah. There were some physical things. The way that the women in my family carry some of the trauma is with the fibroid tumors that we all have our uterus packed with. And, all of the women in the family have to get, full hysterectomies and et cetera, et cetera. And so that was one of the physical component that I was asking to stop. So some of it remains to be seen too, I asked for some shrinking of mine, which did happen. That's some immediate, but yeah.
That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too, because I truly believe that even if she didn't remove them from Jade, but maybe she shrank them, just in that act alone, there could be another lesson that she is waiting to unfold for her. So like, it's again, going back to that being like meta of a meta of a meta, and like so interconnected. Like when ayahuasca looks at Jade's highest potential timeline and looks at all the good that Jade needs to do and how to get her to do that, like, are fibroids in there? We don't know. But like, she's not going to remove something that is a core part of your story of what it is that you need in order to do what you need to do.
Yeah, I know that I'm not done working with her, but my respect for her is greater than any other, medicine I've ever worked with. She terrifies me because she's so powerful, and terrifies me the way that standing at the edge of an ocean and looking at, the waves terrifies me. Yeah. Yeah.
Post manta ray or post stingray accident, or before pre stingray accident.
No, I've always had that reverence for the ocean.
That's cool. Yeah.
Are there any parts that you guys feel like you haven't shared about Aya that you feel like the listeners need to know?
I think some of the practical, like, that what it looks like and what you do, how you drink, what it tastes like. I think people want to know that kind of thing. Like, do you think that's important to share?
I think more prep work and integration as to like, we talk a lot about what happens during ceremony, but I think there's a piece here too. Like, do you really want to know what it tastes like? No one's like, after you get done with ayahuasca, you're not going to be like, I would love a nice cup of Aya on a, Sunday evening sitting on my porch. Like, said no one ever.
It tastes good.
It's prune juice, or as Cass said, raisin soaked in vodka.
Yeah, it's like a raisiny kind of dried fruit bouquet, depends on the vintage, depends on where it's from.
Yeah, pretty viscous usually. It's thick. She be thick.
She is thick. So, but I will say that like, it's not necessarily like you're not doing it obviously for the taste. You're also not drinking a massive glass of it. They're like, and the more that you do it and work with her, the less you actually need in order to get to the space where your consciousness is blown wide open. So like, even some of my mentors most of my mentors are in their 60s and 70s and 80s now. If they were to use plant medicine, they can use, a dropper full, like just so little, and go where people go on 5, 6, and 7 cups, because their imprints are are now gone. So like what she's doing is she's calibrating to the body and she's removing these trauma imprints, removing these filters. So once you're kind of raw and you've removed a lot of these things, you're kind of like a child. You're new. You go in like with eyes wide open, you go in waiting, versus like with all of these kind of masks and filters and imprints.
That is so powerful. Just that fact, because it's the opposite with pharmaceuticals. It's the opposite with, right? The more you do it,
Building
the more you have to
resistance
do.
to it.
It makes so much sense that it would be the opposite.
And it's the opposite too with most like street drugs, so to speak. Like I always like to say, like my dad's genius. My dad is an addict, and like the more he did, the more he had to do in order to escape his body.
Yeah.
Like this is the complete and polar opposite, where she's forcing you to go deep within the body versus further away. So like she is bringing the pieces together and like actually integrating and anchoring you in, versus like this is what, like, I think Jade mentioned during hers too. Like you are very like, you're still here. You're still cognitive. Like you're on another planet, but like, you're still like to go to the bathroom, you're like, okay, cool. Like I have to stand up and I have to go to the bathroom. Like you're not completely gone. Like you can still function.
Exactly.
Which is so different than I feel like
you are forced to be in your body.
Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of
aware of that you are a being and that you have a body that you live in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And God forbid you should, speaking from my experience, like you should have any body issues, like she gonna show you, like, because like I feel like with me, and then Jada, I don't want to speak for you too, but I feel like you can probably relate. Sometimes it's easier to go out and it's easier to astral plane and it's easier to be in the spiritual realms than it is to actually be in the physical body, like especially for me. And like it was like a very forced embodiment practice of like getting back in and getting intentional and like feeling the feelings, feeling the emotions, feeling the waves, and like actually like feeling.
Yeah, no, I'm a little different. I don't astroplane to the ease that you do, but I do disassociate and I do compartmentalize and I do numb, like la la la, fingers in my ears. I'm not here, and you can't do that. Yeah. You can't do that with Aya. That's for sure.
Can't. Absolutely can't.
So tell me, wait, just before, I know we're coming up on the end of our time here. We might have to add a second episode, but if you can, darn. I know we have to go to a part 2. We hate leaving you guys on the edge. Tell me a little bit about integration and why it's important. And preparation, why is that important?
So do you want to take prep and I'll take integration, Jade?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it already. So just to kind of reiterate, like, I know that anyone who takes the time to set intention around why they want to sit with her and ask the big questions, like ask for what you want. Cass was bold. She asked for, healing. You got even more.
Changing what you eat and stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So, right. So every Cass is probably best to speak to this too, because I know that every culture has different, quote rules that they ask you to follow, be it like don't eat. Most of them are no pork, no alcohol.
Pork is kind of standard across.
Yeah. No alcohol.
Why no pork?
So the commercialized pork in the countries that most people live in have so many steroids and antibiotics and like kind of additives. And Aya doesn't necessarily like them because those are man-made synthetics. And with pork specifically, because of the high fat content, all of those things get stuck within the meat. So like it's a little bit easier to have like a grass-fed, grass-finished beef that is maybe antibiotic free versus pork. Like they hold on to their shit. So you don't want to process through your own shit and then the pork that you consume shit. That's like the Hawaiian tradition too. Like Pele is the god of the volcano and of the fire. And she actually had a love affair with half pig, half man. So she doesn't love pork because it feels like you're threatening her man. So that's kind of like little fun Hawaiian folklore.
Yes.
So
yeah.
And actually hike Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea. They recommend no pork products and fasting for that too, because like she has been known to pop her top, as they say, and get pissed off if they're like, if someone brings pork and you're supposed to do an offering, anyway, that's a whole different story, but you're supposed to bring an offering in. And if people bring pork, she gets pissed. So pork is kind of shunned across at least all 5, shamanism cultures that I'm familiar with.
Yeah. And alcohol, that's across the board.
Alcohol is across the board. Pot is not across the board. Some cultures are totally fine with marijuana before ceremony. Others are not. Rape or hape, either one, depending on the culture that you're coming from. Some cultures say yes, some cultures say no. So
in mine, we used it as part of the ceremony. Right.
Hawaiian shamanism, you do not touch any sort of tobacco product, period, before going into ceremony of any sort.
And then there's the like more serious, like if you're on any sort of SSRI or other medications, you cannot, because she won't meld.
They don't interact.
It can even be dangerous. So
it's very dangerous.
Yeah, you can get into serotonin syndrome and things about that nature.
Correct. Because she increases the serotonin in your body. That's part of it.
So even like ashwagandha, for example, like you're not supposed to use ashwagandha before going into ceremony for 30 days, depending on the dose. Sometimes it can be 45 or 60, but like there is and this is something that you would need to work with someone and actually like give them your supplements and give them all of your things, because it's she's very specific.
But the cleaner you can eat the 4 weeks before you go into ceremony, the better. So that's preparation. And then the spiritual and the mental, we already talked about. So integration, though, just as important. And a lot of people skip that part, or it's not built into the ceremony that they're part of, which is not cool.
Yeah. So if you ever hear the people who are like, I've sat with ayahuasca 400 times and I still have to go back, blah, 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 chances are they haven't done integration. And it might sound a little judgmental, but it's believed, again, cross-culturally, that 80% of the work is the integration period, because you are taking all of these concepts from having this higher now realm and opening of consciousness, and you are actually learning to work with them. You are bringing them into your life. You are learning how to like really absorb and like feel into them. And it's kind of that even more fine-tuning of intuition, even more fine-tuning of like who you're supposed to be. So it's terrifying in my mind that people who are doing ayahuasca are not doing integration, because then they're kind of left seeking and left wondering and left like out in the dark of like, what's going on? Like, what did I just do? What did I just experience? And for me, what I've seen working with, I have some clients that I work with that will go do ayahuasca elsewhere and then come to me specifically for integration. And they're almost lost. They're like, I had all of these things happen. Is it real? Is it fake? Was I just tripping? Like they have all like these cycle of thoughts and questions, because no one was like sitting there explaining to them and like holding their hand with like what actually happened. So they either feel like they're going insane. I've had a couple of clients that have, before they came to me, after they had done ayahuasca, like check into like clinics, just because there's no one who, like, you can't have a conversation, especially if you did this and your spouse didn't, and they have zero awareness. Like you can't have a conversation and feel like understood or seen or heard.
You can't have a conversation with anyone except other people who have done it, and preferably those that were in that same ceremony with you, because once you've done that, you're connected and you're linked. It was very hard for me. That I will say that the group that I went with was not good at that piece, Cass, and it was pretty terrifying for me for about a week, because I would try to go out in public and it was really noisy and scary, and I couldn't like talk to people. I was getting worried that I'd lost my ability to just human, like I didn't feel. And I think
we're going to need to have a further conversation about this too, kind of
just integration in general.
Integration, and then like
this is a whole episode.
Correct. Yeah. Like as I'm hearing it too, like, I mean, I've also had clients who I've meant to do integration with them and then have decided not to do integration, and then have had like an awful time and like now hate plant medicine. And I'm like, oh, because they were worried about me judging about their experience. And I'm like, I am not here to judge like at all by any stretch, but I think it's a much bigger conversation than what we can cram into in a couple minutes.
Yeah. Good. Let's do another one then.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great,
and
because
true girlfriend without benefits fashion. We are going to leave you wanting more.
We look forward to part 2.